Hey folks, we're back with part 3 of our least wonderful time of the year series, where we talk about all things holiday and getting through the holiday season while taking care of your mental health. This week we're talking about setting boundaries with loved ones. So here's what we'll talk about today. First, what is a boundary? We'll talk about what boundaries are made up of, what their purpose is. Then we'll look at what kinds of things can I set boundaries around. A lot of times we think about boundaries with communication, proximity. There are all different types of things we can set boundaries around, and it's nice to have a reminder that those exist. And then finally, we'll look at some examples specific to the holiday season. So, a little bit about me. If you haven't watched our old episodes, part 1 and 2, or if you just don't know me in general, my name is Jenna Plummer. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor, licensed clinical addiction specialist, and certified trauma specialist. I work with addiction, trauma, dysfunctional family systems, complex trauma, all sorts of things that impact our sense of self, especially at a young age. I am the owner of Little Seed Counseling. If you have any questions after this, I'm happy to answer them. You can email me at the contact information listed below. So why are we doing this series? We know that the holiday season is really difficult for people. Whether you're dealing with anxiety and depression that you have had all year but feel like they've been exacerbated during those cold winter months, whether you've experienced the loss of a loved one and this season really brings up memories for you that are hard to manage, or like our presentation today, you want some help managing visits with family and friends. So we want to give you some education and some skills to deal with whatever is coming your way this holiday season. And also, we want you to know that you're not alone in this. There are a lot of people that struggle, which is why we're presenting this to you. So let's talk about first, what is a boundary? So in the image here, you'll see there's sort of a continuum. All the way to the left is loose, and on the other side is rigid. Boundaries are really the limits we set for ourselves in our relationships. And if we're on either end of the spectrum, we're really doing ourselves a disservice. So the two factors we look at here are how connected are we and how protected are we? So boundaries, when we look at loose boundaries, we're looking at connection but not protection. So we might be able to spend a lot of time with people, but the trade-off is that we are not able to discern what information we should be sharing with other people, so we can't keep ourselves safe. This is the person who knows everything about their neighbors, and their neighbors know everything about their relationship. This is the person that can't say no to anything and just feels really overwhelmed. So this is a really tricky situation to be in because, yeah, we've got friends, we've got support around us, but we're also not protecting our time, our energy, our attention. And in some cases, we can't even protect ourselves physically. So the opposite end of this is rigid boundaries. And so with rigid boundaries, we are protected for sure. It's like we have a wall built around us so that no one can get in and hurt us, but we're not connected. So a person with rigid boundaries doesn't share about their feelings. They have a hard time asking for help or getting support from other people. So while yes, they are protected, they're also living a life of solitude. So we're looking to find that middle ground where we're both protected. We can make sure that information is not used against us. We can make sure that we're connecting with people who are supportive and that don't want to use us for something. But we're also connected, that we do have that support, especially around seasons like these where it can be difficult. So what can we set boundaries around? Many of us, especially if we come from dysfunctional families, we were taught that we didn't really have the right to set boundaries. Our boundaries were constantly intruded upon, or we were just told, whatever you have, we're entitled to. So it's hard for us to learn what we can set boundaries around as we get older. So we're going to talk about each of these boundaries and give some examples about how they might apply to the holiday season. So first is time. I don't know about you. I know we talked about this in some of the last presentations, but my schedule is jam-packed for the holiday season. And there's times where there are things that I don't necessarily want to do or that take up time from things that I want to be doing. And if it's available to me, I can say, you know what, I don't think I want to do that. Right. So, for instance, I'm part of a couple different organizations where we volunteer our time during the holiday season. And I've had to say, you know what, I can do this and this, but this day I'm not going to be able to. There's a feeling of guilt that comes up for me. That's just how I was programmed. But I'm able to hear that, experience that, and not act on that. I can still preserve my time and energy how I need to do it to take care of myself. The next is body. So this is everything that has to do with boundaries of the physical body. So that's how close people stand to us, unwanted touch, how much space you want to occupy. So with physical body, we can set limits for ourselves, right? So if, for instance, moving my body at some point during the day is really important to my mental health. So when we're during the holiday season and we have that to-do list that's a mile long, I will write right on there. I'll schedule a walk-in, I'll schedule a couple minutes of dancing, whatever I need to do to make sure that that gets prioritized. This is also a season where we get together at holiday functions. Um, for some people, alcohol is involved. People get really close. I don't like that. When somebody's close and drunk and talking in my face, I'm not really a fan of that. So, in this situation, a boundary might look like, hey, I know you want to connect right now, but can you give me a little space? I feel a little uncomfortable right now. Or can you back up a little bit? This just doesn't feel right to me. Um, Conversation is the next one. This is a great one for the holidays because I know when we're sitting at the dinner table or when we're gathered in a space together, it's really easy for religion, politics, sharing information that's not ours, asking intrusive questions to come up. So just know if somebody starts a conversation and you know it's not something you want to engage in that moment, you get to say, you know what? I don't really want to talk about this. Can we talk about something else? And you may get people that push back on that. And at that point, you can say, you know what? I'm just going to duck out of this conversation, but I'll be over here if you want to talk about something else later. Another thing that comes up during this season specifically, another specialty of mine is working with folks who are going through infertility treatments, struggling to get pregnant, etc. And this is always the time of year where you'll get a really well meaning or maybe not so well meaning relative that will ask about intentions for pregnancy. When are you going to bring us that grandbaby? Are you guys trying? Just a side note, don't ever ask anyone this. You don't know the pain that they're going through. So um, it's okay to say, that's really none of your business. I think a lot of people struggle in this area because they might feel guilty for how assertive they're being. They see it as aggression. But just know that if you don't protect your boundaries, who will? Relationships are another area where boundaries can be set. Um, when we have a fear of abandonment, it's really difficult to set boundaries because we're afraid if we do, people will leave. So we get to have boundaries around who we spend our time and energy with. We get to have boundaries around what we need from other people, what's okay with us and what isn't. Next is boundaries around self. So this one kind of goes with relationships and conversation and all sorts of things, but we set boundaries with ourselves all the time. What am I willing to tolerate or accept in my life, etc. One thing that shows up here a lot is who's going to make me feel like the person that I see myself as. So if I see myself as kind and generous and I'm with a person who constantly tells me how cheap I am, I don't really want to spend time with them. Um, and this isn't to avoid someone else's opinion of you, but our job in life is to discern who's going to support us and lift us up and make us feel how we want to feel, not necessarily just spending time with people who are a drain to us. And so we get to make choices around that, and that's one of them. And then finally, content. Just to go back for a second. So during this season, what that might look like is, choosing not to hang out with Aunt Sally and talk for hours, limiting conversation because she's always kind of nagging on you or criticizing what you look like, or, things like that. And then finally, there's content. So a lot of us, especially right now in our culture, we spend a lot of time and energy on social media. And when that becomes a burden to us, or when that starts to not be so great, it can impact our self esteem and it can impact our relationships. So, one of the ways this comes up during the holiday season, you may have family members who want to post pictures. So, a great example would be somebody who wants to post a picture of a child, right? I don't want my child being posted on the internet. So I can say, hey, I love that you have that picture. I'm glad you have those memories, but just please don't post that. The other thing might be, and we all have someone in our lives like this, it may be us, right? But someone who always wants to show us some video of something that they thought was funny, something that they, thinks interesting. It's cool that people want to do that. And it's okay to say, hey, like, I really want to connect with you in this way, but I don't want to watch these videos, or I don't want to spend my time on social media because it doesn't feel right to me. So you get to make, and it's the same with the conversation. So content and conversation go together. I don't want to talk about this. This makes me feel uncomfortable. This distracts me from my goals. These are all things that you can say, and all of those are appropriate. A couple of reminders about boundaries. When we don't set boundaries and enforce them, we wind up building lots of resentment. So remember that you're in charge of what you will and will not accept in your life. If somebody's doing something to you that you don't enjoy, you get to tell them that it's not okay. And if they don't follow those boundaries, you get to decide if you want them in your life or not. Another thing is, when we set boundaries, we're not doing so to control the other person, but to protect and take care of ourselves. So we don't want to use boundary setting for control or manipulation. For the people pleasers in the room or the codependents, please know, and I'll shout these off the rooftop, this is more like a motivational section than anything. Setting boundaries isn't being disrespectful. I know that Aunt Sally probably will not like it if you tell her you don't want to talk about the things she brought up. But that's not being disrespectful. That's actually being respectful to yourself. Setting boundaries doesn't make you mean. Now, is there a way that we can word things that might land a little better with some people? Sure. But the actual act of setting boundaries doesn't make you a mean or bad person. It just means, again, that you're taking care of yourself. If you aren't used to setting boundaries or having boundaries, your family won't be used to you setting them either. So that means when you go to do it, there's going to be some pushback or shock that comes from them. That's okay. Do it anyway. So we asked our team members, what boundaries do you set with friends and family? So for me, I prioritize my little family, meaning my husband and my child. I prioritize our needs over the needs of our entire extended family. So I know everyone wants to get together on Christmas and they're so excited to see us, especially when you have a little one. And I like to preserve things like Christmas morning, or certain times right before bed on Christmas Eve. That's just for us. And so we arrange our schedule that way, and we arrange other things around that so that we know we get to prioritize that. Our clinical intern, Nina, says that she gives herself permission to exit a conversation if a family member brings up something uncomfortable. Great boundaries. And then Jordan, our yoga and movement teacher, similar to me, she says she likes to uphold certain aspects of the holiday season. So she holds up what's important to her, and no matter what's going on, she makes sure that those things are done. So now I'm going to give you a recipe for crafting a boundary. Now, this boundary recipe is a very general recipe. Boundaries don't always have to sound exactly like this, but this is a good framework for you to start to conceptualize what you want the other person to hear. So here we go. First, we're going to start with feelings. So I want you to ask yourself, how do you feel when your boundaries are being violated? or when someone's doing something in your life that needs to change. So an example here might be, I feel mad and frustrated when you continue to ask me about our pregnancy plans. So then you're going to check in with the need. And one way that I like to do this is to check in with, if I were a little kid feeling the way I'm feeling right now, what would I need? So when we look at the feelings, anger and frustration and resentment, those are all kind of like big people feelings, right? Little kids would say, I'm mad, I'm sad, right? So we want to ask, when I feel mad or sad, what is it that I need from that other person? Again, then we want to look at, what can I ask this other person for, or let this person know that I do or don't want. So in this situation, I need to feel safe in the environment I'm in. I need to know that people won't ask me questions that are uncomfortable for me or intrusive. I need openness and honesty, etc. Whatever it is that you need. And then we'll look at fears, right? So this isn't one that we're going to actually vocalize to the other person, but we want to get a sense of what's keeping me from setting these boundaries. So for some people, they may think like, if I say this thing to this person, they're going to get mad at me, or they're going to leave, or etc. In some way, shape, or form, they're not going to be able to handle our feelings. So we just want to take stock of that and validate that for ourselves. I know this is scary right now, but if I continue to let this person do this, I'm going to build resentment, or I'm going to get angry. And then we look at, what can I ask for? So everything in life is easier when we have support. And when we have feelings, especially big ones, and an identified need, if there's anything that we can do to get that need satisfied by another person, is okay for us to ask for. So I need to ask you to stop saying these things to me. I need to know that you're not going to continue to ask these same questions, because they make me feel really bad. And then the last thing we're going to do is practice. So here's our boundary template. I feel blank when you blank. I need blank. If you continue to blank, I will blank to take care of myself. So let's practice it. Using the example we've been using, I feel angry, sad, and frustrated when you continue to ask me if I'm pregnant or not. I need to know that my body and my plans for pregnancy are my own. So if you continue to ask me about this, I'm going to have to separate from you so I can take care of myself. So that's just one example. You can use plenty of them. We can walk through this, but give yourself a chance, pause the presentation, and think through, what are some things that you need this holiday season, and what are some things that you typically feel. So here are some other boundary tips specifically for the holiday season, but some of these do apply just generally. So the first is saying no. It sounds really simple, but just remember, no is a complete sentence. When we grow up in dysfunction, or when we have a history of trauma or abuse, we tend to want to back up our answer with a lot of fluff or information or an explanation of why we're saying that. We don't need to do that. We can just say no and be done with it. The second thing we can do is lead with the word unfortunately. This word's helpful because not only does it convey that we're not going to be doing something, but it does it with empathy. So, yeah, no, like, I don't want to have to disappoint you by saying I can't do this thing, but I also know that in order to take care of myself best, I do have to decline. Next, we want to make it clear. There's nothing more confusing to other people than fuzzy, messy boundaries, right? So if somebody says to you, Jenna, can you make the broccoli casserole? And I say, I'm not really sure if I'll have time. That doesn't tell them, no, I'm not going to do that. It kind of leaves things up in the air. So we want to be really clear that we're not able to do it, and that, it's going to have to be given to someone else. Next is really looking at what we talked about in the last presentation. So when we have a sense of what's most important to us ahead of time during the holiday season, it's easier for us to have a framework for what we need to say no to. Next, we want to say what we feel and what we need. So I think a lot of times when someone talks about feelings, they'll say something like, I feel sort of icky about this, or I feel some kind of way about this. Just remember when we're describing feelings, they're usually one word. And I like to break it down to like sad, mad, happy, scared. All right. Like there's lots of other feelings in there, but those are usually the ones we're dealing with. So I feel angry right now because dot dot dot, or it makes me uncomfortable when you do XYZ. What I need from you is to not do that. So we want to just be direct, and we want to do it without judgment either. So it's not, you need to stop doing that because it's bothering me. It's, or I can't believe you would do that. That's so inappropriate. Instead of, I'm feeling really angry right now, and so I need you to stop doing what you're doing, right? Like take the judgment out of it and just ask for what you need. And then finally, I love this tip. Remember that anytime we're around family, if we have a difficult past, if our family was in any way unsupportive or not as supportive as we needed them to be, we show up at those family parties as little kids. And sometimes they're seeing us that way too. So I know personally for me, it's hard to set boundaries because I think that I'm still that little kid who does what her parents say. So we have to bring our adult self to the family party. I do a lot of this parts work in other areas with folks, but if you had a kind, loving, supportive, and assertive parent, what would they say in this moment? We want to bring that version of ourselves to that party. So you can do some work on this beforehand, but we really want to advocate for ourselves here and just remind ourselves we're not that little kid anymore. So here are some other examples of ways we can address boundaries during the holiday season. If you don't know Nedra Tawwab, I want you to stop what you're doing and go to her website or look at her Instagram because she does fabulous work on setting boundaries. And she put together this list of things that we can practice saying prior that will give us a grounding or an anchoring space when we need to set some boundaries. So the first one, when I come to visit, I'll be staying in a hotel. I'm not going to stay with you. I don't have to. I don't want to. I'm going to stay in a hotel. Thank you so much for offering your home. I prefer to pull names rather than buy multiple gifts. I need help preparing dinner. I don't want to talk about hot button issues. Let's change the subject. So, we've got a whole bunch of things here, but we're looking at physical space. We're looking at conversation. We're looking at what we're talking about with other people. All of these things are so beautiful, and they're not what we would typically use in our boundary recipe. So this is sort of an off script way. And this is kind of like the advanced guide to boundary setting, right? So when I hear people say things like this, I'm like, their boundaries are solid. Yes, right? So practice saying some of these, see what you might need, and spend a little time workshopping these. So, for instance, if you want to use one on what you need help with, you may sit and think, like, what do I actually need help with? Aside from preparing dinner, can I ask people to bring specific items? So have some fun with this. Use this to your advantage. Remember, when it comes to the holiday season, this is about making memories, not about pleasing everyone around you. So take care of yourself, set some boundaries, especially with Thanksgiving coming up this week, and I'll see you back next week. Just remember, sign up for our mailing list at our website, littleseedcounseling.com. With signing up for our mailing list, you'll get free copies of how to set boundaries and a list of what kind of boundaries are available to you. Remember, you can find out what we're doing on our website. Our mailing list monthly will send out newsletters with special discounts and available programs just for mailing list subscribers. So get on that so we can stay in contact with you. Also, remember we have our intern Nina, and she is back with us in the month of January through the end of her semester. So, if you're looking for free or reduced cost therapy, please reach out to us and we can get you connected with her. From all of us to all of you, I hope that you have a fabulous holiday and we'll see you back next week. Next week, we'll talk about how to get and stay in your body. And we've got Jordan, our yoga and movement teacher, here to connect with you and show you how to do that. So, y'all have a great week.